4:35. Let's call this meeting to order. I'm going to skip over number one, so we can get started on number two. That way, Bill doesn't have to sit here all night waiting for us. So hopefully we have a couple of this discussion about number one. So Bill, why don't you go ahead and jump in about proposed DIF program presentation?
Sure. The DIF is something that has been hinted at in prior studies as it relates to revenue for the sewer project. Originally, the town was looking at going in and requesting authorization for new growth each year. Problem with that, to pay for bonds, the problem with that is you get in a situation where if you don't get the authorization, you got to find a way to pay for the bond. So a DIF is from Chapter 40Q, and what it does in this case is it's one of the means to fund wastewater project, and then the other goal is increase commercial tax levy to reduce the burden on residential taxpayers. So those are really our two objectives with the DIF. The way the DIF works is it is part of the investment cycle. And so funding for public projects is at the bottom, which creates an improved environment for private investment. That is a public project. The private investment then increases the assessed value, and those tax revenues or a portion of it go back into funding public projects. So you can see if you don't have the public project, you don't have the increased investment. If you don't have the funding for the public project, you cannot afford it. So in that cycle inherently is anything that's taken out of that cycle, that is the public project or the funding for it, you don't get the new growth. And that's important sort of later. I got to update these charts to the ones that Kyle gave me, but this shows you the second part of this. The first part of it is how to fund wastewater. The second part is we really want to diversify our levy, and we're at 91.27%. That blue line on the right-hand side chart is tax levy associated with the residential continuing climbing. And a red line shows a very slow decline and not a lot of money in the commercial side. Kyle has a chart that goes back to 2002 that shows that as a much sharper decline. And so if you look at that in the relationship to wastewater, there were over that period of time and over the period of time from 02 to 2022, there were blips in the economy where towns were taking off. Mm-hmm. Well, that never happened. And we believe it didn't happen because of wastewater. There is a sort of a stagnating factor. In some of the towns I worked, I was fortunate to be part of the blips, unfortunate part of the downside, but the downside is no growth. The blip, there are none. There's no great commercial growth here. So there's something other than the market that is affecting us. So through a DIF, a town or city can establish a funding stream for economic development activities that's linked to and derived from the results of economic development. And what we mean by that is the actual growth. Market values and other increases don't count. So the advantage is the town still keeps that revenue from those increases. It sets up a process where there's a cyclical process to capture the new tax revenue. And what I mean by that is tax increment and new growth. Only the assessed value of the new growth is used. So that table is not an example locally. It is, we use the original assessed value of a property at 3 million. It gives that tax revenue, which is 59,000. Now you add 10 million to that, which adds 199,500 for a total of 259,350. The DIF can take a portion of this and apply it to a note for the public project or cost to the public project, depending upon how you structure it. So the town keeps the base, that is the 59,850. So that goes to the general fund. The 199,500 goes to the development program, but it doesn't all have to go there. In the projects I've done before, we've had a declining percentage, starting out at 100% capture, only because there wasn't a lot of money, and dwindling down over 30 years to almost 5%. All we were trying to do is hit a number of 240,000 a year to pay off a note. And so you can decline that. So you'll get a lot of money in the back end of this if we use that type of system. Or you can use a straight line 25% or something like that, a percentage, And the outcome is your growth is going to happen in the out years, so you'll have more money even above the 25% coming in. But there's a way to handle that, and I'll show you what that means. And their questions, go ahead and ask.
Can you take 100% of the 199, 500 if you wanted to?
Yeah, so as I said, so in Amesbury, when we started out, we weren't getting a lot of revenue in the beginning because a lot of the projects were still moving forward. That 100% went to a MIPA permit. It was about $400,000 over 2 years.
Yeah.
Then we were getting in a lot of money, and it paid for a $1.9 million note. So you can do 100%, but it was money that we had a condo complex, townhouses. I think there were like, I don't know, 60 units. And then there was on the river, high-end condos. They're anywhere from 800,000 to 1.2 million that was half built, that we captured that. Then we had 240 units of apartment complexes, 40R, that we captured that. So the future stuff is what we really, got the Maples Crossing to do the rest of it now. But the key to this is the diff doesn't show up until the revenue shows up. It's existence or purpose. And the hard part about a sewer project is the revenue doesn't show up until people are convinced there's a sewer project. So when they see the thing go to ground is when and then there's a lag from when they go to ground and you actually get, so diffs, betterments, user rates, they all don't really kick in for a few years. So the tax increment, what is the tax increment? It is essentially the value of the new growth in the property. It is not increases from inflation, revaluation, or market factors. And there's a great advantage to this. When you see the sewer line go down the roadway, irregardless of what anybody does, the market factors are going to probably increase the value of those properties just because the asset's being built. Right. And there is more flexibility and redevelopment as a result. So, the general fund is going to capture that and not the diff. So you're not going to lose just pure market factors. It's only going to be the new growth. So our base values right now, and this has been changed slightly. I've been going back and forth. Both Tara and Andy have been great. And, as we've changed the map periodically. So these are our base values and our taxes. So ostensibly that money still goes to the general fund. You're not capturing anything based on what the existing values are. And then so that whole premise where if not for, and I'll go over it later, if not for the diff, you don't get a sewer project and you don't get the growth, that comes into play. So the growth is, the base is not included, and it's directed to the stream of incremental tax revenues that go to the sewer project. And in this case, the if not for clause, if not for the diff, there will be no wastewater. Now that's not entirely true. If we get a lot of grants, then we may or may not need the diff, but you need the diff, and I'll explain why. If not for the wastewater, there would be no private investment. That's probably true given the chart we saw earlier, that market forces are going to tick some things up. People are going to do some rehabilitation and things like that. But same thing is if you look at other communities, as those upticks in markets, as the interest rates have gone down, larger developments have happened, and they've happened quickly. You don't see that blip. So what are we approving at this stage? We're essentially approving the designation of the districts to lock in the values at a base value. So we're saying all the parcels in the green and in the lavender included, green being the coterminous IRD and DD. IRD is invested revenue district, and it is where you collect from. The DD is a development district. It is where you build. So in this case, we have a coterminous district in the green where you're collecting and building in the same place, which is, Kyle did a great job in making sure that the pumping stations and all that stuff are in there. But this is bigger than the actual phase one. So, Kyle, myself, and looked at where might you see development off the corridor so we could capture it in the IRD. So some of that is in there. Then in the lavender, it is just a development district. It's where you spend money. So 99 Buck Island Road, we're not going to collect a dime off the sewer treatment plant site. Nor are we going to get a lot of money off those 2 runs coming up from Shore Drive. No sense tracking revenue in those areas when they're a few single family homes and smaller properties. So we're looking at the larger values. And again, Andy and Tara have been great in going back and forth and try to get the right, mix.
So where's the farthest east point?
They should go to the corporate boundaries on Route 28.
For the bridge?
Yeah.
Okay. I just didn't see the bridge in the
Yeah,
view, so that's
there's the rig.
okay.
We don't need to go to Dennis.
And,
Well, we
you
could
can
capture
either
some
take
revenue
this
over
question
there.
now or table it, but I'm concerned about the GIZ and how that sits within this. All the things that this town has tried to do over the years and how they might fit or we might benefit from them fitting in this.
This is just about the TIF and all that. Well, TIF is a little different. It's just about the money. So what happens with land use underneath, if it generates income, that's great. But the DIF doesn't care what
Okay.
happens underneath. But we do need to look at what is it when we talked about the market analysis, what is it that we could use to generate growth that is commensurate with low flow, better jobs, year round, uses, things like that. So that's a separate issue for the TIF or DIF. All you're saying is the value of this property at this time is this, any new growth. Now, if we can pattern that new growth differently with land uses to get more revenue. I mean, typically you don't want to put a warehouse in your DIF,
No,
that type of stuff.
my point is actually more specific
Yeah.
to comment that I made at the previous meeting regarding the restrictions imposed on us by the Cape Cod Commission. That, to me, in my experience, my prior experience, been one of the top 2 stumbling blocks of development on Cape Cod. With that being said, this town did make an effort within that GIZ that was extended by the Cape Cod Commission with a purpose. And so that purpose, it parallels this. So what I'm suggesting is that those parameters within the GIZ actually help define what kind of businesses we're going to be able to
Correct.
attract, right?
Right.
Because it said there were exemptions, like if there was growth attached to an existing hotel, that what didn't have to go to the Cape Cod Commission and yada, yada, yada. Maybe this is a rhetorical question, but it would be helpful to know that even though we're having the DIS, how do these other things that the town have done feed into this to support this, and perhaps vice versa. And that maybe that's for the report, that we work on.
Nothing against
during the-
commission. I wouldn't say that an assessment or a growth perspective based on a regulation is an economic development assessment. Because they're basically saying, these are the things we like, these are the things we dislike, these are the things that move easier, these are the things that don't move easier. So if the commission is determining what our economy is through a regulatory process, I don't see it as a economic development step.
Okay, with that being
Because
said,
frankly, it's what they like and dislike.
I know, but unfortunately, we made a commitment to agree to their terms. And if
Whatever,
we- Okay, with that, okay.
Yeah,
And I'm not, you and I should probably have this conversation
Mhm,
offline,
offline,
because it's rather, we can get to the fascinating point, it's it. But to the extent that I would like this group to consider the need to amend whatever we already have in place if necessary, so we do not inhibit this goal.
right. Look, I think from a revenue perspective, obviously you can think of more revenue producing uses that we may not like, and therefore we need to make sure that the uses in the corridor meet, a set of standards and their goals, and then hope they produce revenue. Again, don't put a warehouse in a DIF. It's got very little value per square feet. It's got a lot of truck traffic, and it's got no job creation. All right, so it doesn't meet the basic standards of economic development, other than I've got this horrible parcel out by the interstate I can't do anything with. So why not put a warehouse out there? So, there are land uses from a fiscal impact perspective that are going to kill you in your budget. There are land uses that aren't. So that's the measurement really, is how do you create the economy you want? Because the sewer line is going to facilitate something you may not have had before. That if I were to talk to a medical office person and say, let's go here, there's no sewer line. They're like, yeah, I got plenty of places where there's sewer, no thanks. But if I were to talk to a tourism person at a hotel, let's go here, I want to put a hotel here, that's what a tourism is.
Mhm.
So the attraction is there irregardless of the infrastructure. They're going to come irregardless of what is in front of them. Hopefully that you've got streets and everything else. So you have tourism because tourism is here. You might not have a whole bunch of uses, other options, because you don't have some of the basic infrastructure such as sewer. So tourism is putting up with, if I were to talk to Bruce, rebuilding septic systems on a regular basis, which is extremely costly. And there's a point when the tourism industry, has a problem in terms of, shifts in the economy, and they're not making as much money in pandemic, and they're still paying for that high cost of running a septic system. But it's still worth it to them because they're in a tourism economy. But if we were to try to attract the office buildings that give us a year-round use and everything else, you add the commission to that, I don't see anybody coming. You got to get the sewer down. Yeah.
Exactly my point.
Well,
So I think that within
Yeah.
this, we need to actually just take a step back. And I'm happy to help you. We're happy to.
No, I know. I
But
mean,
I
but
want to learn, right?
right,
That even though and so within this, there's also the gives, and the gives, this says, the commission
Right.
says, you're okay with this, this, and this, but not that, and that, and that. Maybe this group is going, right? You were doing to attract that, and we should be cautious before we.
you would run a model through the market analysis that this group
Exactly,
funded that basically
I'm just
says, at
flagging
the
it
current zoning,
because
how much money is these
this is a
parcels going to
wonderful
create?
tool. It's wonderful.
Right.
And we need to recognize those things that would actually stifle the ability us to use this robustly.
Mhm.
That's all I'm saying.
So
No sense in making layer on layer on
Right.
layer, and you just
Well,
can't.
I
Well,
use
I have a question on the
Go.
map.
yeah,
My eyesight isn't so good.
Yeah,
Long
neither is
distance.
mine.
Tell me about the lavender and why, if I'm right, that's either South Street or Pleasant Street, all the way east.
Chelsea Ave and it's South Street.
yeah. So we didn't see a lot of revenue coming out of fully developed sites. So
I'm sorry, which street is it?
South Street's to the right, Chelsea Ave's to the left. Look underneath the S on the Swan is Chelsea Ave.
Going right to South Shore Drive.
Right.
So those are where the pipes are gonna go down to South Shore Drive. So the reason that those are included,
It
because they're
flows
gonna, you can use the money from the diff to pay for those pipes that go down. So they're gonna be
So
it's a development
The
district,
lavender is a development.
correct?
and the green is a combination of both. It's a coterminous collection and spend.
So
So
the development is the sewer,
correct.
That's correct.
not a reuse
Not a
of
reuse.
No,
of the
no.
land.
No, development program, usually in TIF is,
Well, I mean, since I live here, I mean.
It's a flows. It's a
I'm
flows.
Just wondering what the lavender is.
no,
It's taking from 28 going down to South
Oh,
Shore
yeah.
Drive.
it's actually force main going up to Route 28. What is it, C? Yeah. Is it C?
So- Chelsea Ave.
That's gotta be-
Yeah, that's a
whatever it
force
is.
main.
So-
CVUF.
Is it CVU Ave?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
fine. South Street, so we'll go down. and see that.
So the large lavender is the actual treatment plant
CVU
site
south.
itself.
Yeah.
We're not getting any
Yeah.
revenue out of that. So a DD or development district is where you spend the money. And IRD is where you collect it. The combination is in the green. We'll both collect and spend there. And then the ones where we're only going to spend are in lavender. And so the best example is I have a downtown that has a development proposal, but the sewer treatment plant needs an expansion. The sewer treatment plant is a few miles away. And the downtown doesn't have any improvements in pipes or anything else. So you might collect in the downtown and then send the money to the lavender at the sewer treatment plant. So that's why the state breaks them up into IRD and DD.
And the large lavender is the.
Is
The
a treatment
plant
plant
is the
site
plant
at
itself,
Buck Island,
okay.
right? So, you know, hopefully now, but it's all wet pretty much anyway. But you know, it is a pretty big site. I'd like to see something there, but most of it is all the green is both IRD and DD. And the two runs up and down there, those are basically single family homes that we don't see worth tracking for growth. So therefore they're not IRD
So
because the
question-
assessor has to track the growth on everything.
So Bill did his presentation this morning to our board, and the question that came up after, I wasn't sure how to answer it. So all of those homes will automatically be connected to the sewer?
The diff doesn't recognize connection or no connection. It just collects or builds. So if we didn't do one of those streets, then we wouldn't be using the diff to pay for the pipe. Let's put it that way. And there's, you know, there's a little bit of confusion on how you designate this. I prefer that you designate the lots on either side in the event that you need to do a tie-in or something that you need to
Right.
spend money on.
Yeah.
So that I don't end up stopping at the property line
Right.
if there's something I need to go into the property for.
Okay.
And, you know, apportioning my diff based on that. So you capture all the properties on either side of the street to say, here's where the improvement is.
The Giz is,
A little further to
You keep
the
going.
right hand, keep going.
Which is a good swath.
There's the opportunity zone, which is
That's
basically
Right.
east of Parker's, River, and then there's the growth incentive
zone,
zone,
which goes,
which does extend all of Route 28, but it only applies to 35 motel properties.
right, the Giz goes west.
It's the whole Route 28,
Yeah.
35 properties.
The
So how
Hamptons
far
Inn.
does the opportunity zone go? All the way to the,
I think the opportunity goes from like
Pancake
Parker's
Man
River to.
Parker's River back to Bass River.
okay.
So we might in the future, if we have sites which, oh, there you go.
Yeah, remember, they're old eyes here.
I wasn't ashamed to get up there.
So this is rather confusing because usually people make it coterminous, but we did not really want to get into the battle of tracking, you know, tax values on those two streets going up and the one going up to Buck Island. We're just sticking to that. And the advantage of a diff right now is you're into almost all of your, what you would call system-wide improvement. The treatment plant is a system-wide improvement. It deals with all the phases. It will be done in 2 phases, but right now you want to try to get as much revenue in the first phase so that you can then not pass on the system-wide improvements. You can't stop paying for the treatment plant because we haven't got to phase 2. So you need to pay for the treatment plant in phase 1 before really you leave it. You have to find a revenue stream inside that phase. So a diff helps you do that. And we are very fortunate because, you know, sometimes you see these sewer projects and they start in near a residential neighborhood and there's no money there. You know, this is starting on your commercial corridor. And with a diff, you're capturing that to try to pay for a treatment plant that has to be paid for before you move on to phase 2.
Mhm.
So that's a distinct advantage. And the other thing that diff does is it positions yourself so that betterments are and user rates are going to be things that the homeowners pay and then businesses pay. A diff, nobody really pays it. So you're trying to get much value out of here so you can lower the betterment and then user rate related to capital. So this does not create a plan for spending money. The development program does that. We do that at the next town meeting. The reason why we're doing this here is we're afraid that as a result of the sewer project getting some legs and having talked about implementation, you know, values are going to go up. And if the values go up, we have less increment. So if you saw, if the value was 3 million and you up it by 10 million, what if that value was 7 million and you added that? You don't have as much increment. So we want to capture the values now. And then at the next town meeting, you're saying, okay, this is what we're going to spend it on. This is how we're going to spend it, what the percentage is out of all those expenditures. How much are you going to take out of the diff?
That's in 2023.
That's 2023. I'd like to do in the
So
fall.
is there a date certain when you set basis?
Base would be town meeting, pretty much. But the base is January 1. I had a long conversation with Andy and Tara about this. there's some confusion in the industry and we're following the format that Andy wants, which is the one I used when I was in Amesbury, which is all assessors set the values of January 1, but not all the data is in. So they actually assess the value at June when you get all the building permit values and everything in. And then you set it again when you're really getting DOR to set it for you. So where we're going, what I typically do is we write a diff saying it's January 1 or as may be adjusted by the assessor during the valuation process with DOR. And then he then can go in and the last time I did this, we must have tweaked 5 properties, that was it. It was just, and, as I told him, I don't see some big tower being built right now as I drive up and down the corridor. So I'm not going to lose that value between January and June.
Right.
So we're going to be as conservative as we can and let Andy tweak it after DOR certification comes in. But it's January 1, according to.
For the following fiscal year, right?
Yeah, so you're really capturing all your 2021 value changes into January 1, but then you're also capturing building permits which have not been assessed, entered, inspected between January 1 and June. So,
Yeah,
And-
actually, speaking of commercial building permits.
no residential counts.
Oh.
Yeah, grandma's dining room is in not a lot of value, but I had some high-end condos once I thought we were going to be 800,000 and they started selling for 1.2 million. So we were good to go. And one of the things you want to do in terms of these values is you want to go out and actually sit down with developers. And so 3 years before we started running the DIF program, we went out and started moving projects like the 40R, the condo project. Some of them were tied up in Chapter 91 and MIPA permits, and we sat down and said, okay, how do we make this work? They then started moving because we had a good market anyway. And then therefore I could capture them when I did the diffs. So you want to do a little bit of butt kicking from the development side to get them to start growing. And we had 5 projects that equaled 120 million in new growth. So that was what paid for our 240,000 and everything else was gravy. You're not going to get that here. You're going to have to take some of the broader growth, but you do want to get about 4 or 5 projects out there that are going to give something to at least get some of that growth attributed moving forward. We can't do it off sort of a speculative, we think everything's going to go up by X.
Bill, hang on a second, Kathy.
I just had a question. In the DIF area, what's the annual new growth that we're seeing now, even without sewers? Because that would then not go into the general fund.
So that would
It would go,
go into general fund. Any growth that's associated with market is general fund. It has to be, are you talking about
I'm
growth?
talking about new growth. Right now, we estimate what, $400,000 a year of new growth in town. How much of it?
I don't know. I'd have to talk to Andy, but what we would do is get all the prior TOR reports and determine what that is and proportionate to this thing. It's not like you're right. Yeah, I think it was 400,000, but it's townwide.
Right, so I'm just wondering if that number is gonna end up
It's not gonna
actually
be a
going
lot.
down if the DIF money is now going towards new growth in this DIF area, which some of it would have happened naturally, is now going towards
Right,
the DIF.
right. Yes, you will be pulling money out of that. At the same time, you'll see hopefully market increases associated with the sewer line that the DIF doesn't capture. So the point is that we set the district, and between now and 2023, that analysis that CEDC has funded is going to answer some of those questions so that we can say, here's a percentage, here's how much is not going to go to the general fund, here's how much is going to go to sewer. Because the difficulty in the development program is we need to figure out what the betterment is. We need to figure out what the WIF for the other forces provide, and the diff can fluctuate in percentage so it can fill in a gap. So, but you don't want the betterment to fill in gaps because it just goes up. So you want the diff to be a tool that lowers your betterment to the best ability. So while people might say you're taking the new growth, at the same time, don't have that betterment, higher betterment fee. So there has to be analysis. The analysis was easy for us to neighbor. I had 5 projects that equaled $120 million of new growth without the big project. So I said, there it is. They already have building permits. They're already in the ground. They're good to go. So here's my growth. And, there was a concern about, capturing that, but then we looked at the total district and the 500,000 square foot athletic facility. We basically said, this thing doesn't happen unless this happens, so don't count on it. So the DIF generated 4.5 million on top of that in MassWorks grants. The development wouldn't have happened without those things happening. So our goal is to show that this DIF leverages funding, and therefore the larger growth projects aren't going to happen as a result. So we're not requesting any funding at this time. We're just setting the base. So funding will come next time when we create that schedule in terms of percentages. DD and IRD, I think I should move this up in the presentation. Basic explains when you spend money, when you collect money. And somebody told me, don't use the guy with the cash.
Cross through it, not asking.
Yeah, right now, that's right. That's a good one. I should put a cross through it. So this is the explanation on the map, which I think I should put here earlier. Green color is the 2, and then lavender is the 1. And it is unique to do both, but this is a big area. I mean, I really don't want Andy and Tara to be chasing down values just because a pipe goes up the street.
Right.
Why are the areas larger than phase 1? Because phase 1 is smaller. It's usually in a map with the blue color, because we're trying to capture sites which may have some development potential, which don't show up in the CDM phase 1 map. I mean, clearly you can run a sewer pipe to the back lots, but we're showing them because we have to show them to grab the new revenue. So the DIF process 2022, we set the increment in the areas. We conduct the analysis that I had brought forth to you to help us determine what some of those values are, what some of the implications are in investment. And then we develop the public investment, the development program, which is basically what Jeff and others are doing to say, here's the cost of the project. And then we determine the percentage. So whatever we're getting in revenues from grants and other things, and then from the other sources, the short-term rental tax, I've lost track of all these little columns, but those given revenues where they are available, the DIF then serves as a sort of a filter that says, okay, I mean, I've scheduled it so you show up at the DIF and you lower the percentage, and then all of a sudden it increases the betterment column. So you basically go back and forth, and that's the financing plan. So you try to say, do we think we're going to get enough of this revenue? And if we do, then I can lower my betterment because the DIF is going to cover the revenue. But we were really conservative. The townhouse project had houses slated to sell at 500,000, and we put them at 350,000. And so we put in buffers in all our values, so that we didn't, come back and find out that they were lower. So now they're selling at 650,000. So, and then spring 2023, seek approval for the development program and the invested revenue percentage. And that's at the same time that we anticipate we're going to be seeking the approval of the funding for the project. And at that time, hopefully we've lined up a few grants so that the grant agencies see that happening. So, Kyle and I have been looking at that. We're probably going to look at a MassWorks grant for this round for design, because we don't have real concrete designs for the treatment plant, and the timetable is too far out for them. They're pretty much in each individual fiscal year, but we'll 2.4 million in design will save us that amount of money, which we would apply to construction. The key to this is, because it's a sewer project, as I explained before, you got to fill the top of this thing with somebody else's money. to be able to move that money down into a later phase. So we're going to be pretty aggressive, but you can't be aggressive unless you set up tools like this or sit down with developers or figure out what the actual costs are of the project in the sequence. So those are all sort of ongoing. But a lot of people use this. It's gotten a lot easier to use since they did the, development programs. As I said, I know a consultant who used to do this. And these things used to be like 50 pages, big thick books. Now it's 20, so it's a much easier process. But I do not know how I'm going to explain that map at town meeting.
Currently, are there any other diff programs going on Cape Cod and Cape Cod towns?
Yeah, Easton actually. Easton,
Easton,
somebody told
yeah.
me Chatham is working on one.
Okay, but Eastham has one currently.
Easton.
Easton's not on the
Easton,
Cape.
not in the Cape. Okay,
Okay.
there you go. The
Nantucket-
other side of the bridge.
Nantucket, we've talked about it, but they actually had a development project in the works.
Mhm.
I
A
mean,
lot
that-
of-
That was a,
Some of it is really strategic.
Mhm.
We have a sewer treatment plant upgrade. We got it. It's
Right.
for this area. This is a big project.
This is a huge project.
Yeah, and so diff in this, so Somerville uses them a lot to be another source of funding with transportation funding and things like that. And it's sort of your fungible money because it can be used for a whole. So if you get tip money, you're only going to use it for the transportation improvements. Diff can cross every single boundary. You can even use it to pay staff if you wanted to. We're not going to get that funky with it, but you can use it for marketing programs. You can use it for a whole lot of
Mhm.
things. So
So what's your sell at town meeting? Because sitting here with the five of us, I think it's a fairly easy sell. Sitting there with 200-300 people in the auditorium.
yeah, it's going to be about how the diff consumes by then. Hopefully I'll have a better financing plan.
Mhm,
It consumes the costs, so it's reduced in the betterment side.
mhm.
So we've been going to the angle of increasing commercial value to decrease residential.
Okay.
The difficulty is you don't want to say growth, and then have
That's
people
where
realize.
That's where I'm going with it.
Yeah,
without saying
people
it.
realize you make more money if you make our lives miserable,
Mhm.
That's what we want to get away from. So we need to get into, this is the same system you've been talking about for years, which is close.
Right.
But in the past, they talked about taking growth out of the entire system across the entire community and each year coming in and asking for it.
Mhm.
The difficulty with that is that it's difficult to basically float a note or guarantee that. In any given year, the school department come in and say, yeah, this is what we want. And then
Right.
suddenly you're asking for that piece of that growth, trying
Right,
to
yeah.
pay a bill.
There's,
So the diff is the only mechanism legally that you can do this.
there's also a smaller scale diff that was approved by a town meeting 2 years ago.
Yeah,
So there's precedent for support. from
Really?
town meeting.
yeah, there was. And that'll be one of the questions.
where was that?
That
Where was it? It was centered around like the Nicanello property and kind of village center area.
Yeah.
So
So
the
how
di-
can, so I guess the bottom of my question, as a committee, how can we support you?
So sort of eventually a letter of support, which we talked to the chamber this morning, we'll talk to the CEDC. The resolution is a different thing. That's for wastewater. We can talk about that. And then, so I'm collecting letters of support for this that eventually will go on a webpage, which is the economic webpage that Kyle is building, that we would hopefully push out for town meeting. So we will put the letters of support there. We will put the diff, and then so the economic page is going to hold the diff. It's also going to be on the financing page, but as a function of financing only. And then when we write the letter of support, it would answer some of the questions that people are going to ask at town meeting.
Sure.
Those types of things. When I've done the diff before, what's usually made it work is that you have to show them it's either this or you.
Mhm.
You being the taxpayer or you being the betterment payer. And that's the argument that I've used with West End project, where the developers' new growth was creating the revenue to change and interchange on 495. And we basically told the city council, that as a result of that growth, we can do this project. And it's a project that they've been wanting to do for 20 years, but they never had the revenue. Or we'll just go and we'll try to get it through a bond and a tax revenue and everything else, and or betterments in the area and those things. And so that's one of the arguments that seemed to work there, is the growth is paying for the asset. The asset can be used for much more than just that growth.
You would ask for a couple members of the committee to help support you in the next.
So that was a resolution, so we can talk about that separately from this.
Okay.
But there is a committee that's set up as part of this legislation, right? Locally.
Not
That would be
really.
appointed, I think.
The committee happens after we get the, yeah, so it's the, I don't know, you remember the acronym PDOC?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so the reason why you do that is to track the revenue and then determine the development program. So the easiest way to express that is in the DIP document itself. Hopefully it comes in, see, now I'm having a hard time. I can't even see the top of the thing in the DIP document itself.
It's around 25, it's page 25.
Yeah. So, no, I just want to show you the flow chart that shows you how to allocate the funding. And that, these are the things that in developing it, there was a lot of arguments on what the law stated, and this is the,
Right.
so that definitive step shows that basically the money comes in, it goes to pay the bond. If there's any excess revenue, then this committee decides to push it to the general fund or use it for other things in the development program. And then town meeting might have to have some of that vote, but the advantage of this system is I usually like to just apply it to a bond and the gravy goes back into the general fund so that we're not losing it. So the committee really plays within this chart. That
Well,
table.
while you're scrolling, can you go to page 14?
Is that up or down?
Yeah. give me one. It'll be on the, one more. Okay. So 14, the lower, the last paragraph,
I'm not reading that.
incorporation of the goals of town economic incentive strategy.
Yeah,
Is
we're
that-
gonna have to develop that.
Oh, okay. I was afraid I missed something.
Yes,
That's
there
right.
is in the back. There is an incentive strategy in the back. The incentive strategy usually relates to, we're gonna use it to create jobs. We're going to use it to
Yeah,
retain
quality
and
of life,
expand,
those four key
all that
concepts.
happy stuff.
Great.
So,
Bill, you had this presentation this morning. You want to take a second and talk about the chamber board's position in support of this?
They are definitely 100% behind it, so they will be writing a letter of support as well as the resolution.
Great.
so what they're going to probably write, I'm just reading your mind here. Is on how it's
Hear me
going to
out.
stimulate growth for businesses. What
That's right.
this group is going to write is diversification, job growth, and diversity in the tax base. So this is more about, as it relates to the community, they're more about as it relates to businesses. So you can take two different tax in the same thing, so you don't have too much of an overlap.
Yep, absolutely.
But what we were trying to emphasize to the board is for them to really educate themselves. When this happened a few years ago in town with the other dip,
That's right.
like I really had to learn a lot about it. And I have to just say, Bill has done an exceptional
Yes, he
job
has.
trying to educate the community.
Yep.
And he did a great job at the select board meeting and then again this morning. And now I'm trying to just get the board to really understand what this means.
Yeah.
Because it's a big deal for us. This is what we've been waiting for. And for them to be able to talk to their neighbors and be able to talk to their business community and
Right.
be able to explain this to them, because it is complicated if
Yeah.
you don't understand it.
Yeah, and there's some examples I've given in the past. I used to own a landscape company and I bought another trailer and a large mowing equipment. I basically took all the revenue from those customers and put it into the debt associated with that. That's a diff.
Right.
And that's pretty much it. I could have taken the revenue and bought a nicer truck with all the bells and whistles and then gone out of business. But, you basically look at that improvement and then that revenue that comes from that improvement, the other 15 customers that I could take on went right into that debt and made that debt go away as soon as
It's an
possible.
investment.
Right.
I'm just, you and I, we all understand that here around this table. I'm just concerned going to town meeting.
No, you're
That's
right.
why I was asking the question.
And I'm wondering if there's other groups, not, I know how busy you guys are, so I'm not trying to dump more work on you, but if we can.
Mass,
help out-
the description on mass development site is pretty easy reading. You could edit it, or maybe, you know, maybe
Coming
the
from
best
the
thing is.
EIP, yes, you could say
I
that.
Yeah.
You already know
I'm
the
really good at
script.
reading regulations, statutes. I mean, with that being said, I would be happy to.
Yeah, I have to, I don't really, I don't use this disparagingly. I have to dumb it down in terms of the cycle and everything else. The example I gave you in terms of the landscape company is pretty true to form. You know, I've got new growth. That new growth paid for itself through the revenue associated with that new growth. And then the rest of my business was still moving on under that revenue stream, but I dumped all that revenue stream into that. And obviously the labor that it was associated with that, it was paid separately. So that'd be the market increase. But fact is we have to give simple snippets. We have to show spreadsheets that show, let's take property X and see what happens.
Yep.
And so I did that to some public venues in Amesbury, but I mean, that's the, whether it's advantage or disadvantage in a city, you can just hit them about for
No, I
6
know.
times.
No, yeah.
Well,
And
the
educate
FAQs was also good on
Yeah.
on the site.
Mhm.
And we've done FAQs before
Mhm.
on various planning board articles. And obviously the state's one is very generic.
Right,
But we could make, I think having an FAQ of some kind
right.
would be very helpful. I'll share with you, I wouldn't doubt that the people there, when you say, use the word betterment, they don't know what that
That's right.
means.
Right.
They have no
They
idea.
don't know, they have no idea what that
No,
means.
my
They have no
fear
idea
is,
between the distinction of being, so,
my fear is that they want to see the financing plan for the sewer and how this gets incorporated.
Yeah.
They'll think way out.
Right.
Because the document, typically the guidance is you submit the entire document for both phases and show the draft. I know somebody's gonna stand up. It's right here in the document.
Right.
You've got the words here. We're approving this right now, you know.
Mhm.
So I mean, it might be that I turn all that font green and say, we're not approving anything in green.
So
And get
speaking
that
of what's in
simple.
the document, I would like to just express my opinion. I don't need any comments, but you, in the document, it says it will, like, a sewer will attract, you know, commercial development, and the diff will, I think the right words are they intended to? Because I am convinced that having the more tools in our toolbox
Mhm.
is more likely than not to attract commercial development, but I
There's no
am not
guarantee.
convinced
Right.
that a wastewater or a sewer is going to increase commercial development along, in our town. I think it's a tool. I think it's one tool.
Yeah.
With that being said, I'd be cautious about it.
No, I mean, we can use, it's intended to do
Mhm.
this and that. You know, there is some, at least, you know, Mark does a great job of keeping track of people who come in and see him, and eventually, once in a while, you know, or recently he said, I've got 2 hotel guys and they can't figure out, well, do I wait? Or do I do that septic system over again? So they're in between, and it's like, as long as they don't do it before April, I'm okay. It's not filing the building permit, it's what they have in the ground for Andy to determine, so it's not a problem, but it's trying to, you're right, incentivize at the same time. So the sewer shows up, if somebody doesn't do anything for 5 years, it doesn't do the diff any good.
Mhm.
So you need to incentivize at the same time you do the sewer line. So you tell them, here it is. We had a TIF in Newburyport that we put on several lots. And we said, you got 5 years to file something or you lose the ability to do this. And, you know, that was a long, long time ago when the TIF was a little bit more, you know, liberal. But we had a developer saying, well, I was going to do it in 3, so let me start capturing it. So if they, you know, started construction within 5 years, this is what their TIF would be, and we would negotiate it with them and do it. We could do the same thing on some key parcels and say, you got so many years to put a building in the ground, and you get this quick 5-year TIF if you do it. That's a little bit more difficult to go to town meeting with, but it's how you get a sewer line to become, you know,
Revenue producer.
an instigator, right? Because if they sit on their properties and kind of, oh, let's see what happens with the market, and then they start growing in year 4, I've lost 4 years of value.
Mhm.
Right, so you need to be going to ground.
Kathy?
I
Yeah,
would just be careful in some of the letters that are writing that, yes, economic development. Okay, there's gonna be a lot of people out there who want controlled or managed growth.
Mhm.
So just making sure that that kind of language is put
Yeah.
in, and we want better, not necessarily more.
yeah, Bob, when I was reading this, said, call it investment, don't call it growth.
I do want to open the
That's a
floor
good point.
to everybody. If you have any questions or comments about the letter of support, so I know Bernie, you've expressed some, Steve?
No, I'm just trying to think ahead of the audiences that you might be speaking with, and then if that's the case, if you're going out, you know, I'll volunteer, I support one.
Okay, no, that's a good thing.
I'm just thinking of why are we doing wastewater? Well, we're not doing because we want to do, we want a project. We're doing it because we're being kind of told by EPA and others. that we need to do
Eventually,
this
yeah.
thing, Right, so I think we ought to lead with that a little bit to get some of the naysayers out there are gonna say.
That's another hour in this meeting. though.
I don't know.
But the future of Cape Cod is what it
Well,
is.
exactly.
So that,
But I think if you led with just a paragraph on that.
It does not
yeah,
say
you're right. I mean, you need wastewater, and that's, I think that maybe we add a third leg in the beginning where we have pay for wastewater, diversify the tax base, but pay for wastewater becomes, you know, pay for wastewater for the environmental reasons
Right.
and not the economic.
It's not so much the businesses, I think, it's the, you saw that big pie chart up there is residential property owners. You got
Right.
residents. And some you're never gonna convince, but others that are on the fence, you wanna be able to rationalize with them. We're doing this for a reason. Strength is right.
Right, and you know, we've been fortunate so far. We went in with the fall with the enterprise, and this one we're going to go in with a stabilization account for the short-term rental. So Bob is taking care of some of the accounts that are, you know, a little bit more, you know, that are not as unique as this one, to lock up accounting systems. So, okay, we got this column done and it's gonna go in this account.
Right.
We got this column done and it's just going in this account. So by the time we go into the spring of 2023, all the columns are locked up in the budget, so, or in the financing plan. And so he's been doing those, and I'm doing this, and I'll probably work on betterment in addition to this.
Great. Joanne? Any-
No further. comments.
Joe? Good?
I'm happy.
You happy?
I am.
I like that.
You just can't tell.
You're really a great poker player.
He's indifferent.
That's right. So how about a motion
Absolutely.
to in support of
No
writing a
kidding.
letter in support of the diff zone?
So move.
All in favor? Aye.
And I just want to mention that Kyle is working on the web pages, which will get to some of your issue. There's an economic page, an environmental page. Board of Health has written a resolution. And in that regard, I don't want to go over it in great detail. We would ask for a resolution from this group, and just 2 people that can, once it's written, I can go over it in between the meeting
Mhm.
and then nail down the details. And the purpose of the resolution is you do whereas, and then you basically outline the parameters of why you support it. And then it's great for grants. It's great to post on the web pages we're doing. And it's a little bit more timeless than a letter of support.
Sure.
And then we do now therefore, and you make sort of the problem state, you know, the solution, and then be it resolved. Now, typically you use these in cities, but I've used them in towns because I send this in for a grant. I use this for this public meeting, things like that.
Can I
The
get
the
two-
Board of Selectmen gonna do one?
I don't know, I'm working a circuit from, starting with Board of Health, because it's all moot. If they don't join in, then I'm going here to the chamber, probably going to go to Concom, work with somebody like Rick Bishop, planning board.
Beach and rec,
What's that?
beach and recreation.
Beach and recreation. Yeah, that actually would be a good one. I never
Yes,
thought about
very
that.
good.
And then sort of surround the wagons.
So can I
They
get two-
can't say no.
so can I get 2 volunteers? There's 1, 2, you got your 2.
And we will be going to RAC, but what RAC is going to do is say, whereas the Board of Health said this, whereas CD said, because they are the sort of bringing it all in.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
I didn't know, I didn't need that, no. I just thought you were checking.
okay, that's all I
Great,
have.
that's
I
it.
appreciate your time.
Nice work, Bill, thank you,
Thank you.
appreciate it always.
Thanks, Bill.
You're scaring me with what's going to happen at town meeting. You're gonna have a lot more
Not scared,
work.
yeah.
Some of these people get up to the microphone.
That's right.
There we go.
Heather, you're up.
Am I up?
Yep.
Thanks. Yeah,
So, and I apologize for one minute.
yeah, sure.
So as you know, the planning board is looking at 2 zoning amendments for annual town meeting, including the short-term rentals to make sure that we can basically legitimize short-term rentals in our zoning bylaws so we can continue getting the revenue. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I think you guys are fully on board with that. We did have our public hearing on the 16th. And there was, in general, I would say, mostly support for the provisions to regulate short-term rentals and to help the neighborhoods, as well as to ensure keeping that tax. And also people seem to be in favor of the sunset clause to allow for more time to review it, knowing that we're trying to do this quickly because we have money at risk here. We don't want to have a problem. We want people to be comfortable at town meeting voting for this. So, and also noting the need for enforcement and compliance, including payment of the excise tax.
Do you, Mr. Chairman, through you, do you feel comfortable, staff, that enforcement's sufficient
I
enough
think
to monitor this?
one of the best things that have happened is the Board of Selectmen at their meeting on the 15th approved the additional housing inspector position.
Yeah.
So hopefully if that moves forward and gets filled, filling positions is its own problem.
Right.
But the first hurdle is obviously getting it approved. So I think that will help because I know that Kevin Hookdown, who's the housing inspector, is totally overwhelmed with
Mhm.
just, but even before the short-term rental tax came in, just they do all rental properties and they inspect all the motel rooms, and we have 3,500 plus motel rooms. So there's a lot of work that's being done there. So hopefully with that additional position, we should be in a better place.
So one person you feel be able to cover it sufficiently?
Well, that's all we're going to get.
Yeah.
We'll have to wait and see what happens. I mean, that's one thing that we haven't really been talking about with wastewater. All of this wastewater, all of this development is going to generate more permits, more review, and no one's talking about, how that's going to ultimately impact staffing levels.
So let me
for
ask the
town.
question a different way. What would be the best case scenario for staffing? 5 people?
I'm sorry, I couldn't answer
So
that.
probably
It's
a
really
better
up to the
question for
health
Bruce
department.
Murphy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've been asking for a second full-time person for 3 years now.
Okay.
So I think it's a case of getting them online, see how it meshes, see how things work, and identify whether they need any additional staffing.
How is that affected? Do they actually go out and, are they monitoring things online?
They do
Okay.
multiple things. Obviously, there's all the rentals. So there's actual registration that's required. So whether you're a short-term rental or you're a seasonal rental, like for the whole summer, or you're an annual rental. So they do lots of things, like they send out the applications to people who have been doing it in the past, making sure that they get registered. Then what they like to do is go and do an inspection, at least initially, in order to set that occupancy load, because how many people can actually stay here. And then what they'd like to do is do annual inspections to make sure, everything is still up to snuff, all the smoke detectors, all of the fire, and that it's a safe place for.
Does
for someone
DOR
to be.
share their registrations with you?
Yes,
They-
well, yes, we can ask, and they have shared, and that's how we came up with the 889
Right.
short-term rentals in
Mhm.
2021. You can go online and get a general street address to get an idea, but the two didn't really match.
Right.
They had fewer on the general generic that the public could look at
Mhm.
than the one that they sent to the town.
Okay.
But it's actual street addresses for the town. And there, hopefully with the second person, there'll be more mixing and matching and taking a look at that short-term rental registry at the state to make sure that they are registered locally and that they're paying their taxes. So
That's
that's,
the bigger issue
yeah,
in
yeah.
itself.
I mean,
right
that
there.
people were concerned at public hearing of, are we getting all the excise tax that's due us? And having an additional person, I think will help make sure that
Right.
there's a coordination. It all goes to the state and then it comes back to us.
Right.
But if we can coordinate and double check the
Certainly,
list.
there's, I'm not naive enough to believe that there isn't a whole underground economy.
You're never
based
gonna
on-
get all.
You're
of
never
them.
gonna get all of them,
No.
exactly.
No.
The guy who does 2 weeks out of the whole year, that's one thing.
Well, if you do
know?
2 weeks out of the
Right.
whole year, you
It
don't have to
doesn't
pay.
qualify.
You have to
Right,
register, but you don't
31
have to
days,
pay.
Yeah,
But,
So I guess we were just kind of looking for support from CEDC for the short-term rental, but also the seasonal employee housing at motels and hotels. This is really something that came out of the subcommittee from the Chamber of Commerce, there, the community partnership of identifying that there's like 150 individuals short for housing that we're going to have this year. And we've had like, I guess, 400 J1 and H2B workers in the past pre-COVID. So there's a large number of people that we need for our seasonal economy. And as we all know, it's getting harder and harder and stiffer competition for that seasonal housing. So the idea was to take an existing bylaw that we have that allows up to 15% of motel rooms to be used for seasonal employee housing of the motel owner or the tenant of the motel, and expanding that to being any Yarmouth business.
Right.
I think the biggest thing that came out of the public hearing was clearly identifying what does it mean to be a Yarmouth business. People saying, well, I'm a Yarmouth business, but my employee works over in Barnstable because I'm a landscaper. So we're looking at tweaking, we're meeting tomorrow night with the planning board of maybe tweaking that to be something where a business located within the borders of the town of Yarmouth. So you can capture not just restaurants, physical businesses here, but businesses that then send their people
elsewhere,
out to different
plumbers or
places. Yeah,
electricians or-
right, exactly. So we're gonna be looking at that
So
tomorrow.
you're not
tomorrow
increasing
night.
the numbers, still staying at 15%, just.
Still
alone.
staying at 15%. Yep, we're just expanding the pool of seasonal employees that could utilize that.
So how does that work as a practical matter? Is it a lottery?
I think as a practical matter, no, I think as a practical matter, it would simply be, a business owner, say restaurant or retailer, somebody's has a contract with some motel owner so that they then can say, okay, J1, H2B people, I have employment and I have housing for you. I'm
Okay,
attractive,
you see
come
this
to me.
being cheap.
I
It's
see
a
it business to
Securing the
business.
spaces ahead of
Yeah,
time.
it's a
Yeah,
business.
that's the way it works. I mean,
That's the way the chamber
I
runs
will
it.
speak.
You'd love to be able to
When I
book
was
it.
running hotels,
Yeah,
back when J1s and H2Bs were still coming to Cape Cod, right now that J1 program is basically dried up completely. H2Bs will be back this summer. One of the things the H2B program requires you to provide housing. J1 program is written and they have to provide access to housing. So we used to, when I was with a company here that had hotels in Yarmouth, we would work, because we weren't gonna rent rooms that we were making $800 a night on. So we would find rooms elsewhere. So we were basically doing what this bylaw is now allowing by right to do. I'll be candid with you, the way we got around it, and you didn't hear it, was we would work with whatever hotel.
Right.
We would say, put them on the payroll.
Yeah.
And very candidly, in some cases, I'd have them on their payroll and I'd have to supplement that guy's payroll just to stay within what the
The rules.
original
Oh,
rules were.
Yeah.
It was a crazy way around it. It worked. This allows you now by right to do it. So,
right. It does require a seasonal employee to work 24 hours or more in the town of Yarmouth, understanding that somebody's going to have probably 2 or 3
Multiple
jobs and,
Right.
and doing that.
24 hours per week.
Yeah,
per week.
yeah, no, period.
For the whole summer.
Yeah. There was a lot of
A
dis-
day.
24 hours a day.
24 hours.
Yeah.
They probably feel
Well,
like
some
they
of them
work
do,
24 hours a
so.
day.
Yeah, right.
We only had 10 people commenting on this, either through written or oral comments at the meeting,
That's
but
actually what I was just gonna ask you that.
The-
Are there any public comments to either one? So,
the majority, the first one was like 8 people commented, and they were mostly, I would say, in support of
Oh,
the
yeah,
short-term
yeah.
rental. With the seasonal employee housing, it was slightly different, and I think the majority of people who commented expressed an interest in having a sunset clause on this article as well. Obviously, there were people who felt that it really wasn't necessary. Having a sunset clause is very unusual
Mhm.
in zoning, and I don't think the planning board was interested in putting one in here. It kind of makes people have to, if it's all working out, then have to come back again in order to solidify it. I think people saw it in the first one. It's like, well, why is it in the first one and not in the second one? The first one is obviously because of that financial risk. We don't want to risk people voting this down because they don't feel comfortable with it because we haven't had a long planning.
And you're
process on
planning
it.
on having
A little bit of exactly discussions. Let's keep talking about it. And this fall, we do plan on having a summit with the planning board and different departments and stakeholders and say, how did both of these things work
Mhm.
this summer? You know, are there some things we need to change or we need to amend, or did everything work pretty slick?
Oh, you're gonna do that anyways? in
The
fall?
planning board's going to do that.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Good. I'll take
Yeah, we're
care
gonna
of
check
it.
that, make sure.
Yeah, do a little check-in and. see
You don't
what
need a
goes.
sunset clause when you're doing that, you know, when you're reevaluating, you know.
Right, and then, to be honest with you, we tweak the zoning bylaw all the time. We
Right.
see, you know,
Nothing's
what
ever
worked 5
final,
years ago may
that's-
not work today.
Yeah.
And you're always.
Nothing is ever
tweaking
final.
it. Yeah, and you're always tweaking it a little bit, and that's kind of the process, and is to go to town meeting for that.
Was there any
versus
real estate
sunsetting
companies
clauses.
that commented on the short-term rental changes?
The only people who commented on it, it was the Cape and Islands Realtors.
Mhm.
They did comment with regard to not having weddings, because we
Mhm.
don't allow any large-scale events. But quite frankly, most of these short-term rentals are located in residential districts where like a venue of any type is not allowed.
Right.
So that's a commercial venue. So obviously, we kind of tried to soften the language. So like if you had a very small gathering of family for a reunion in the backyard, or you had a small wedding, as long as it's not disturbing your neighbors, that's fine. But residential uses, no large-scale events.
Right.
Yeah,
Any
the hiccup
kickoff?
I had was, the first one was the enforcement of it. But if you're gonna be looking at this again in the fall, kind of doing a debrief on it, I'm okay in it, and it's backed up by the sunset. I'm okay with
Yes,
it.
and it's happening now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been happening
Right.
all along. I mean,
That's right.
the traditional vacation rental is no different. You might have a few more of them. You
Mhm.
know, that's all.
Okay. Any other comment on short-term rentals? Okay, hearing none. How about the seasonal employee housing? Any comments or questions? Mary, anything? Just came back in the room. I thought.
I'm supportive.
Mary loves it.
Yeah, I think we all are. So,
I mean, it doesn't solve the bigger problem,
Right.
but it gives the small businesses another option, especially the retail and the restaurants, to be able to put their employees
Mhm.
into the hotel motels if there's a need for it.
it's the only solution right now, people. But otherwise,
Well-
all this conversation we had about summer economy and resort economy and stuff, without help, it's gonna dry up pretty quick.
But if there's some seasonal, not seasonal, but there's some housing out there that's hotels, for example, they're not being fully utilized to the extent they can be. But yet have the infrastructure there, but for some needed investment to bring it up to better code, it could be used for this. I think we should be supporting that, and that's where the tip might come in down the road a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, my only comment is, you know, from the upgradability about the revenue producing, but this isn't producing enough. Basically, what it's doing is keeping those properties that currently, right now, and this is not any comment on their conditions or anything, it's just, it's keeping them viable without allowing and making, yeah, we were, our J1 students, when I was with the hotel company, were paying $125 a week per head for a bed. That's basically what it is. Well, that's not enough to, you know, so you times that by, in many cases, 2, so you make it $250 a room per week.
Yeah.
You know, there's not a lot of reinvestment, $250 a week on a hotel room.
Yeah.
I'm just stating fact, but
Yeah.
otherwise,
Therefore, the subsidy is some
That's
some
right.
type of public subsidy.
Eh,
We're
yeah.
gonna need to,
some sort of incentive,
yeah.
so.
because I think we got the number of units that we need. We just need to start ticking away at.
Yeah.
Over the next several years to meet that need. That's all.
Absolutely.
And I think the reality too is making sure people understand that our hotels, even during their peak season, are not full. There's plenty of rooms
Mhm.
that are vacant in
Yeah.
town. We have, you know,
A lot of
I
those.
had this conversation with Paul from the Cape Cod Chamber the other day, you know, and back in the day, right, they built all the hotels because there was the need for it.
Mhm.
People travel differently. We have, and that's why other businesses like Wacquasit and the Pelham House, they're able to buy those hotels right now because they're not utilized.
Yeah.
And they're able to use them now for their workforce housing, and some of them are actually trying to make sure their business is more year round.
Right.
So that that housing is not quote seasonal
seasonal,
housing.
right.
And their zoning, when you look at it, I mean, Dennis is a perfect example. I mean, their zoning was written where it was allowable. You know, our zoning is very restrictive. And, you know, I think that's part of the next step. What, you know, what's the long-term solution that we have to look at?
Just out of curiosity, has it been, I'm just asking this because I lived through the issues, but I don't mean this as a knock on YPD, but was there any comments from YPD on seasonal
Oh, yeah.
housing?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
actually,
they were very
Frank
involved.
came to the meeting and he was involved and he had a few tweaks, but they were fairly minor. I
Good.
think he'll be very important, well, maybe not Frank himself because he's retiring, but
Right.
the police will
When
be
is Frank
important.
finishing up?
I thought it was
October.
like October. I wanted
Okay.
to say October. I think we need to be careful too of going backwards. We had many years where we had motel rooms being used as year-round housing and spent a lot of time and effort to kind of clean that up. So we want to be careful that we're providing, if it's seasonal housing is one thing,
Mhm.
and 15% is one thing, but year-round housing in motel rooms is something that we've really
Right.
worked real hard to get away from. So
And the other businesses in the other towns, they're not really hotel rooms anymore of what they've been able to create. So
more
we're
suites.
trying to do more and more homework with those other communities to see, you know, and actually go on a site visit and do a walkthrough. Yes, Steve, you and I have talked about that, right? To really see what they've invested in.
I'd be interested. In that.
Yeah,
Good.
we're trying.
So you're looking for two separate letters of support or one?
Not one letter support of the two planning board zoning amendments for short-term rentals and seasonal employee housing at motels and hotels.
Hearing no more questions or comments, can I get a motion for a letter of support for the short-term
So moved.
rentals and for the seasonal employee housing in motels and hotels?
So moved.
Second,
I would, pass in a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Good work.
No, passes unanimously.
Is Robert here? Is,
Oh.
I don't know if are you hybrid or are you?
Yeah, we are. I don't think he is. No, he's not.
I don't know if you're interested in knowing what happened at the public hearing.
Well,
No, it's
can I
not.
just say, I was just gonna make a comment, because I don't know what was discussed when I was out of the room. I
Mhm.
apologize.
What are we talking
Talk
about?
about you.
And we're supportive.
If you, no one was watching the meeting the other night, I want to just commend Joanne because holy
Beautiful.
cow, wait, you were amazing.
oh, thank
You
you.
were,
Mary.
no, I even said that to Kathy.
Tour de
because-
force.
That makes me blush.
No, But as the chair, you did an awesome job managing that crowd and keeping the meeting right on topic.
Good.
So I just wanted to make sure I said that.
I've been
Nice job,
taught by the
Joanne.
master.
Spirited.
She
Yeah.
has to,
Spirited?
she has to tell me only once to keep it on target.
Joanne is
We
an
let it go,
excellent chair.
we let it go a little bit at the special town meeting hearing. And that was not gonna happen again.
Good.
That was not gonna happen.
Good
Um,
job.
So let's
If
talk
you-
about it.
Yeah, I just so you know, it's all on the town website. You can certainly watch it. There were 15 oral comments and 10 written comments on it. All of them were opposed for a variety of reasons. Mainly expansion of the commercial activity would be unwelcome, incursion into the single family area, more noise and traffic, impacts to wildlife, light pollution, stormwater runoff, loss of privacy, decreased residential property values, and impacts to seasonal rentals. Many felt there was adequate commercial property available vacant, empty for sale on Route 28 already. And it wasn't really necessary at this time to rezone a residential lot for commercial. And a lot of people just felt that the benefits purported by the proponents and Robert did come and present for the rezoning didn't really overwhelm the detriments to the area. Multiple people commented that they were concerned that this was spot zoning. I did touch base with town council and it's not spot zoning because it already abuts the commercial district. And we've certainly done that many times in the past. So that's kind of what happened in the planning board will be meeting tomorrow night to vote on their recommendations for all of the zoning, including the petition.
What's the comments from this committee? My
I'm very
comment is I'm very happy.
Yeah.
I'd like to wait, my personal opinion, I'd like to wait to see what the planning board's discussion is tomorrow. Would be my quick comment, but I'm one person on this committee.
I mean, if the underlying uses are consistent with land use and it's not causing major traffic issues that you've done some work on, I think. right?
No traffic analysis has been done. A lot of people commented on, and this is somewhat, I mean, even if that property was developed with the corner lot and became combined, they probably wouldn't be able to have full access off of Route 28 because there's a stacking lane.
Right.
Maybe they could get a right turn in only. So there would have to be another fully functioning access on Berry Avenue. And people had a lot of comments about how dysfunctional that whole area
Right.
is during certain times and people having to go through residential neighborhoods to avoid it. So we don't know what it is. Traffic varies depending on what the actual use is going to be. But the fact that they have to have that extra curb cut, there's already some issues. There's the 99, there's the gas station there that it could be problematic to add on to that.
Mhm.
It's too bad that the Celtic Kitchen couldn't, like, they could expand into that because they're abutting right next door. It'd be great to just a nice expansion for them. But they probably don't
There's
really
no
need
need,
it. So
right.
why pay
They're
for
the
it?
ones that sold it.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Very-
3 years ago, they're the ones that sold it.
Oh, I did not know that. Thank
Yes.
you. Yeah, interesting. And everyone kept saying it's been vacant for forever. And somebody did indicate that 17 Berry Avenue used to have a house on it and first it was
was
torn
haunted.
down.
And that somebody.
It was haunted.
haunted?
That's what they said.
Really?
I played in that neighborhood when I was a kid. We used to ride our bikes through the 99 lot. and
Yeah.
Little did we know it wasn't haunted. There was probably just some homeless people living
Right.
upstairs.
Right. But you thought it was.
Much better
haunted.
story.
Make it sound like it was haunted. Yeah, it was in disrepair. I'm absolutely in favor of rechanging that because it has that there off the tax rolls for a long time. It can be utilized. And 99 extends beyond. My mother lives in that neighborhood now, and I don't see a problem with the 99. And you know, but for those people in that community, it's a relatively summer enclave. I think they need some support over there so that they don't have to navigate 28 in the summertime to try to get to where it is they want to go to have a drink or go out to eat or whatever.
Mhm.
I'd love to see it done.
I think the majority of people who came were lived there,
Mhm.
residents, full-time residents.
Joanne?
I'm going to abstain from the discussion just because we've got the meeting tomorrow.
Steve?
Oh, I'm good with it.
Okay. No comment?
This could be our first diff.
What's that? All right.
I am just afraid that eventually it's gonna go 40B. And I talked to Kathy about this before the meeting.
Mhm.
If property owner wanted to, he could do that.
On 17 Bear.
On any of it, really.
Yeah, right. Hey,
On both of
I'm
it.
sure the opponents would love that.
yeah.
I know. Well, I'm just saying though, but that's could be a possibility.
It could always be a possibility, anywhere.
Yeah, but a really strong one when this one wants to sell.
Absolutely. Well, can I get a motion then in support of citizen petition, excuse me, of 17 Berry Ave rezoning?
So move.
Second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
I abstain.
What was the vote? Oh,
Two abstains.
I have to abstain.
Yeah.
you're not gonna get it to pass. then, I guess.
I did listen to the comments, so at the moment I would have to, I'm gonna vote no. I don't have enough information to say, I need more information to say yes.
That's what I think.
Doesn't pass then.
Do you vote?
Mary, did you vote?
I did. I said yes.
So
Yeah, I didn't think you got that.
so
did
it's
not.
3 yeses and 1 no and 2 abstains.
Yep, so it still doesn't pass.
Okay.
I just want- I'm not opposed to it, but it is a bit, in my opinion.
Yeah, I just don't have enough information to make what I feel I'm educated. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, last time Robert said he was working with the other property owner and you guys wanted to
He did
see,
send that.
but yeah, it didn't exactly say like an
Right.
agreement that we're gonna
Right.
work together. It just said that he supported
That's right.
yeah, okay. Yeah, so just wanted to add that,
That's
if you
fine,
guys
we wanna
remember that.
abstain too.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it.
Have a
Thanks,
good
guys.
evening.
Yeah, 2:30 still okay for you? Yeah. Good. All right. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Thank you.
Yes, I'm gonna stop in.
That's on the
I'm
30th.
the designee.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did you get the flyer that I delivered today to the painting company?
I saw a screenshot of it, yeah.
Good.
So we're gonna jump back to number one, just talking about community organization. I left it till I figured it was just us and Kyle in the room. I'll just remind everybody, a year ago when, it was a little more than a year ago now, I think, when, because of COVID, everything, the timeline's getting all screwed up. But when Peter stepped down as chair to become a selectman, I was the vice chair and automatically I had said at that time, I'd be happy to do it for a year. I personally feel that we need a different voice, and whether it's the next person says I want to do it for 10 years or a year, that's their decision. But my feeling is we have some really smart people in this room, and I just really think we needed to mix up the voice of this committee. So I'm willing to step down. I'd like to stay on the committee. As a matter of fact, I do want to stay on the committee, but I do think that it's time for a new chair. My thought on it is to use a natural transition of after town meeting. And then after town meeting, however the next chair is, take over. And so Steve is the vice chair, and I think Steve wants to take over as chair. But that does mean we will need a vice chair too. So I don't know if anybody has the interest or wants to discuss it tonight or not. I don't think it makes a lot of sense for Steve to take over me to go back as vice chair. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But certainly it's
Are we
open for
missing
discussion.
anybody?
Joe
Missing
Gibbs.
Joe Gibbs.
Okay.
Um,
Do we know Joe's interested?
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if Kyle knows.
He hasn't expressed an interest to me.
Well, how about if and when the vote comes?
We can make Joe since he's not here. Vice chair. That's a great idea as far as
Well, I wouldn't mind, but certainly I would defer it being the newest member to the group. So that's why.
Well, this has been up for discussion for a while.
Yeah,
now.
we talked about it previously.
Yeah.
For several
Joe,
meetings.
yeah, several meetings. This is just really an all candor is to try and get this done, make sure everybody's in agreement.
I wouldn't mind.
Great.
Okay, great.
That's great news. So
You
I
guys wanna vote?
nominate
All right, yeah.
Yeah, I
Steve
think we.
O'Neill and Maria Marasco
And
as
I second
vice,
it.
there you
as
go.
chair and vice chair.
Effective what date? What's town meeting?
It's April, I think 26th.
So what's the next
May
meeting
1st.
after that?
Just say May 1st.
May 1st, okay, effective May 1st. We have a motion on the floor and a second. Can you get a vote, please? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Congratulations.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
there you go, guys. Thank you
Maria.
very much.
Thank you very much, Steve.
We'll have to exchange phone numbers.
Maria, there's
You know,
some hazing
people
involved.
watch.
Oh, yeah, really?
So starting in
Learn a lot.
May, Steve, I'm gonna run all the agendas past you like I've done with Ken and Peter, just so you know.
It used to be at the old haunted house on Berry Ave. They've had to relocate it in recent years
Oh,
across
I
the
was hoping
street.
it was at the bar or something.
No,
I
it's,
don't know.
We can do
Mary's
that
got a
too.
dungeon in her office.
Never done that before.
Well, I think it's always a good time to start. Yeah, review of past meeting minutes real quick. I went through them and I actually didn't print them all, but does anybody have any comments or corrections from the past meeting minutes?
I have one for February 22nd, Kyle.
Bring it on.
Okay,
Oh, okay, and I said you were.
22nd.
And I didn't bring my copies, but I
Yeah.
know that I was not present for two of the meetings, so I want to make sure I abstain.
Here, you can, here, you load those. I do have a request that the February 22nd be amended because I did ask the staff review the existing economic studies conducted by the Cape Cod Commission under the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, and it would be nice that it would be noted in the
Okay.
minutes. So, yeah. Anyway, I have a concern about this consultant contract. I'm tired of throwing away money.
the consulting contract with Bill.
No, the economic studies.
Oh, okay,
Isn't that the bill?
that's the
That's
bill.
one, yeah.
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 It is?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah.
Okay.
You want to take these individually then?
Yeah, let's just take them individually. Can I get a motion to accept the minutes as printed on January 20th?
We're not gonna be able to do 25th because there's only 4 people and Joe is one of them and he's not here. We've been trying to vote on those damn minutes for,
I don't know if
Three meetings.
Right. How about the 15th? Is that good?
Well, there is the town clerk's. You
You go,
You can vote on meeting minutes if you weren't there.
You just have to say that you reviewed
You have
the
to-
video
yeah.
and the meeting
Right.
material. So if you guys want to, yeah, you can, or you can do it out of necessity if you need to. But we can also just wait.
Just
until-
No, we'll just vote.
just read the
Yeah.
next one. I don't wanna put anything in that isn't
No.
accurate. How about February 15th, 2022? Any comments?
I am gonna abstain from that. 'cause I wasn't here.
Yeah, no Mary at that one.
Okay, is that anybody else that we got to worry about?
No, I think we're good other than that.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve
With
as
The February 2nd? Yeah.
February
February
15th,
15th.
February 15th as
Fine.
printed.
Fine.
Okay,
Who made the motion?
Steve,
No.
Second,
Second.
so second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now, the February 22nd, there's a comments on the floor that,
Yeah, so I'll move that they are amended with the caveat that that I noted that this organization should review the existing economic studies conducted by the Cape Cod Commission and their economic development strategy. So moved.
okay? I get a second on that?
second,
Okay. All in favor with the amendment change?
I have to abstain.
Aye.
I wasn't there. I have to abstain.
Aye.
So I abstain.
I guess I'm making sure I was at that.
Oh, here,
meeting,
Mary.
because that
It says
was-
you were, yeah.
I was-
You were
okay,
there.
Then I,
That room.
oh, I
that
read
end
them,
of
I
the
just
room
needed
was-
to make sure. Okay.
Actually, it says Joanne was there too,
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what I
that's the
got
correction.
amended.
but.
Yeah.
so-
All right, good. How about committee member and staff updates?
Kathy gave mine.
Kathy gave yours?
Yeah, pretty
Okay,
much.
good. Steve?
We're gonna talk about the Dragon Site Organization Committee because the meeting was supposed to be this week, it's been kicked off until April 4th. I think. So
Okay.
give you an update after.
Anybody else? How about Kyle, how about you?
Our land disposition committee that was scheduled for today had to be canceled because the chairman's under the weather. But we're looking for the first week in April. One topic I wanted to bring up to see if you guys had any interest in pursuing was, we're talking about trying to get revenue generators and new businesses and diversify our industry, become more resilient and year round. We have an industry that we've banned in Yarmouth that is a huge revenue driver. And we have 2 neighboring towns that have also banned it, which provides a huge opportunity. You guys know what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
recreational marijuana.
Yeah.
And it's actually been mentioned at the Board of Selectmen level. I think Selectman Horgan mentioned it the other day
Yeah.
about something we should be looking into. I don't know if you guys are interested, but I would say if anybody at the town is going to kind of push the drive to look into this again, it would be this committee as Community and Economic Development.
I don't have a
But-
problem looking into it. Anybody else's thoughts on it?
We created the zone.
Yeah.
It's not
We just
banned in
didn't-
town. It's just. in
No,
the-
we
It is
created.
banned in town.
It's totally
there were
banned. I
two-
thought
there
it was
were
the
two-
adult opportunity zone, whatever you want to
There
call
were
it.
there were two zoning amendments, one to create its location,
We're on it.
and then
guys
the
for it?
second was to approve the establishment of businesses here, and we said no to that at town meeting. And we have to wait 2 years.
It's been 2 years.
Has it
been
been,
2
is it,
years,
it's been
yeah.
2
It's
years?
It's definitely
already?
been 2
This is
years.
recent.
Already. Oh, God.
It was before I started working for the
Oh, my
town.
goodness.
I will say this much in all seriousness, I work part-time doing books for a gentleman who owns a bunch of commercial properties throughout Cape Cod. I do some, night book work for him. And I had to go up to drop off some keys to a new tenant of his up in Provincetown, a business that he owns a whole block of buildings. There's now 3 dispensaries in P-Town. And I didn't know that until I don't hang.
And what's happened to the children? All the children
Yeah.
become
I don't hang out in Providence, but what I can tell you is the one that happens to be right next to the building that he owns, he doesn't, I tap and tell him, I say, hey, you should buy that building, because there was a line out the door. I was like, holy smokes.
Kyle, we have a board
Oh.
member, his name is Brett Husak, he's from East
Yeah,
Town,
right.
and, yeah. So, Brett is how do I say this? He's a serious investor in helping startup cannabis businesses, I would say nationally. And he has been working with some of the Cape legislators. And what he's seeing is someone like a community like Provincetown, where they're almost hurting themselves because there's too many,
Right.
there's too many dispensaries that somebody's gonna drop.
Yeah, you have the market figure that out though.
Yeah, that's right.
Market
Right.
forces.
So, but I bet you Brett would be very interesting to talk to because this is in his realm of, his profession. So I'm sure if you ever wanted to sit down and talk to him, he would be thrilled.
Candidly, I've actually been considering submitting a citizen petition in the town of Dennis to reverse it in the town of Dennis.
We'll let Yarmouth do it.
But I'd like to see Yarmouth do it first, because either whatever town does it in the Mid Cape area is going to see a huge boon in revenues. Because right now you have to go past Barnstable, past Yarmouth, past Dennis to go to Upper Cape. You can go to Brewster, you can go to Wellfleet or Eastham, I guess. But actually, I don't even know if Eastham has it. But and all the towns banned it because think of the children and think of all the impacts it's going to have on society. And has that happened in any community on the Cape that they haven't been yet? Have we seen, crime going up and more police presence? And we haven't.
Why are you looking at me with this?
I'm just, I'm asking you, Steve.
I have some very respected individuals in this community that come in my office and I'm like,
Yeah.
It's not me, man.
I, for one, don't want to be in a car accident with somebody who's just, it's just another vice. However, with that being said, one would think that the market would actually drive it. All right. So so let's technically, it was banned. So does the ban remain, or the ban was only in for 2 years?
Ban
Sunset.
remains.
No, the ban
And
remains.
it's sun.
No,
But
the
it
ban
could be
remains.
voted out
Yeah.
after
The
two
ban
years.
remains.
You can't
It's in effect until-
reintroduce an article that the town meeting has voted down for 2 years.
Right.
So we've gone beyond that 2-year period. And the one article that would allow the presence of for the sale, not
The
I think it
production.
was the production. I forget
So-
exactly. what it was.
Manufacturing.
Yeah, Manufacturing.
Yeah, growing facilities.
So it was a dispensary. We have a location, we have a zoning location that will accept it, but the town said no to,
And where was the location?
it's up.
Ansel Hallett.
Ansel Hallett in the
The
adult entertainment district.
Okay, so with that
It's a
being
good
said,
spot for it.
with that being said, there
Right
is,
off the highway.
there is a protocol, there is a way to do it, right? And with the host agreements that have to be whatever. So it seems to me that this is an interesting topic, personally, to explore the actual mechanics of having it. If that is something that.
So maybe Brett
And I
will
think
come
this-
speak to us.
So
Yeah, if we could get this gentleman.
yeah,
here,
if you want,
we get to a lot of our-
yeah.
Well, I mean, and it's also in terms of, it's actually on the town side, right? In terms of getting it approved and then
On the game.
and then whatever happens on the state side. And with host agreements now after all that controversy, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
So in the interest of full disclosure, I've done a lot of consulting for the UFCW and their national cannabis program. And I did a lot of work with them off Cape, specifically with Boston, when they were developing their rules and regulation and their application process. I've worked with a lot of other municipalities. I actually helped them start to form their apprenticeship program. So if we're talking about doing it, we might want to consider ways that we can legitimize the profession as a vehicle to gain some support, because we can then bring in some potential union membership where the people that are working there are receiving benefits and pensions and training and, have the backing of a legitimized cannabis union that started in California. They must have 15,000 members by now in California, and they're
Really?
spreading out across the country. Yeah, absolutely. And it's not who you think it is working in these places. And most of what they do starts out with medical.
Mhm.
So you start with a footprint of medical, and that's how you sort of back into the recreational side.
And medical is allowed.
Yeah, you can even have dual purposes.
So
I've seen
we
it
do
in
allow
places
medical.
where you've got two
Nobody's
entrances.
come,
But nobody's come forward.
nobody's come forward.
And, no, and I mean, I realize that. And the tax base is, it's like 3% of gross sales go back to the town, so it's a big number.
But in
We
the
have
scoring
big-
rubric, you can
A big
actually,
project coming up in the wastewater where we're gonna need all the big numbers we can get.
you can do a lot of work in the scoring rubric and the application process to make sure that you get the right kind of, I don't know what it is the right kind means, whether it's a large multi-state operator or it's a boutique operator that's got some equity and component to it. So there's a lot of ways that you can make it more palatable to the residents at large by doing certain things that sort of fight the stigma of, guys that are selling dime bags out the back door, like,
Right,
because that's what a lot of people think, the children, et cetera.
right.
But, there's ways to do it where the investment in the
That-
community can
yeah.
be,
And
can
that
be
area
apparent.
is pretty good. I mean, like, think about Wareham, the traffic issues, they all backed up and it was like, a nightmare.
And that
And
doesn't
then-
happen
But that
anymore,
was in the
really.
beginning. It was-
Yeah, I know,
that
but-
was the
but-
main thing.
Everything has a beginning.
And people have an affinity to I'm not pushing them specifically, but the UFCW is also the Stop and Shop workers that everyone got behind, that everyone appreciates what they did during the pandemic, et cetera. So there's a lot of ways to make this more palatable, and 3% is no amount of money to sneeze at when you think, especially if we're first mover on the mid Cape, right off the highway. The revenue could be, it's going to taper, market
Right.
forces will make it such, but it could be a huge investment at exactly the right time, a huge revenue driver at exactly the right time. So
Can I maybe suggest, can I set up a meeting with maybe Joe, Kyle and Brett, and they can at least have a conversation?
We can talk
Well,
about it.
whatever, do it with the whole committee, so we can all learn about it.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
That's how I'd like to see it happen.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, other than seeing the line at the one in Provincetown, I don't know nothing about it, so.
Maybe what we said, get the steps that are involved.
Yep.
As far as we can
Yep.
establish.
On the host agreement stuff and all that.
But no, it's good. I think.
Well,
Yeah.
You're
yeah,
tying
this-
into the wastewater.
I'm a
Kinda
little- I'm a little shaky on the town meeting rules and things, what has to go where and what steps they have to go through.
where's the other zone besides on Willow Street? Or Ansel House?
There's only one.
There's only one.
There's only one.
I mean, no, it's not
It's
gonna
completely
bother
underground.
anybody out there.
No.
It's gonna be on the highway, off the highway.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think
That's
it's a
why-
great
And I'd
spot.
love to get numbers from other communities about exactly how much tax revenue they've realized from these operations to show people.
Huge.
So that, like,
You can cover
Brett
the
will
state.
have all that.
Yeah, you can get that all from the CCC. And they've made all the mistakes by now,
All right, thank you.
Yeah, that's true too.
all the mistakes.
Good idea. Kyle.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Meetings, April 12th, discussion with selectmen post, we gotta do that, guys. We've been,
Well, yeah, I can't-
before I finish up, I want to make sure. we have a-
And she's locked in for that meeting
What's
date.
the source box racks, though?
It's the streets, the street light boxes.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I thought that was had been taken care of.
Well, we did a few, but people liked them, so we were gonna try to do some more.
All right, cool.
Selectmen post, wouldn't have mind, but the last meeting Ken and I were at, she brought it up again. She's
Right.
starting to hint around the edges.
She
there.
said something like, this almost does what we want, or like this is a good start or something. And it's
I
like,
guess-
what
I
do you
guess my
mean?
Comment about having her here is what's our agenda that night? I don't want to just sit here and have coffee with her. That's not.
No, you're right. You're right.
Well, it was like, she was on the initial CEDC. So what did you guys work on when you first started? What was like kind of what's different then than it is now? What would you like to see the committee working on? Stuff like that. That was the impetus of the meeting, but
I would take it once, respectfully ask her what her issues are with us. I'd just like to take them one by one and
Yeah.
say we agree or disagree.
it's your meeting. Do whatever you want with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll catch up to you before. I'd like to put I don't want to become a hardball questioning, but
Yeah,
the
yeah.
bottom line is that,
No, but I figure, We're here to listen, but what are your issues? What are we doing now?
yeah, I mean, I think part of it, I think we all know. I think part of it, her feeling is we spend too much time on
The tourism revenue.
tourism and chasing parades and clowns, you know what I mean?
And yet she had 50 people marching with her in the same.
Well, that's a different story altogether.
Now,
you go.
she's a friend of mine.
There you go.
She's a friend of mine too, and I'll say it to her.
Well, I think that's part of. Don't yell at me. I'm not crazy.
Oh, and by the way, she was not in a golf cart.
No.
All the
May
other
10th
members of the board were
May
in
10th
golf carts.
broadband planning.
They were.
Yeah, we're gonna try to bring in the IT director in to talk about, what are our next steps want to be?
Let's
What do we
finish
want
up
to
here.
prioritize?
Guys, let's just finish up strong.
Sorry.
1 second, okay? We're almost done, then we can all go.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
No, that's, I'm sorry, just
Uh,
broadband planning, can we get the IT director?
Yeah, I've been making sure he's on it. We've just now completed 2 years after the fact, it's being completed this week, the
Mhm.
community compact IT grant to wire 4 different town facilities to the broadband. And that sets the stage. He wants to apply for another community compact IT grant, I think, to wire some more facilities. So
There's
Um,
probably infrastructure money coming from the county too for broadband, right?
right, ARPA, yep.
And then seasonal housing, didn't we just have that? So.
True, yeah, you guys wanted to talk about seasonal housing and we kind of put it off, but I think I would agree that you guys just kind of talked about it, but if you want to talk about
Let's
something
put
else.
Cannabis in there.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Put cannabis in its
Mhm.
place.
All right,
And the only thing I have for the 12th is, the town meeting warrant's done. We're gonna at least we should just run through it.
at least look at it, yeah.
Just all take a look at it that night as a committee before town meeting, because I know we have some stuff we're gonna have to get up in front and present, but I think we should just all take a look at it, so we all know what.
That's
what's
a good
going on
call.
that night.
That's good.
Thank you, guys.
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
All in favor? Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
Let's stay all night. I'm in favor.